Okay. Rheinberg, well, first of all, as most of you don't know me, I'll just give you a little quick background. I was given my first microscope with by my father, who was also a keen microscopist, when I was 10 years old. I'm knocking 80, and I've been fascinated with the damn machine ever since. So I've played with it, and I have one or two what I call microscopists and natural history heroes from the 19th century, one of whom is the man I'm going to be talking about tonight. So what I'm now going to do is share my screen with you. And oh, hang on a minute, it doesn't work as well as it should do. I can't open this now, can I? Yes, I can. Right. Rheinberg, Julius Rheinberg. Why is it called Rheinberg illumination? Well, obviously because it was invented by microscopist Julius Rheinberg. He was English in spite of the German name. His parents had fled Western Germany because of the persecution of Jews at the time, and he and his brother became very active in lots of fields, including the development of optical gun sights for the British Army, Navy, etc. He invented the very first and only, as far as I know, full spectrum color camera and projector. Everything that we use for color these days is 3 colors, but he used made one that used all the colors. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about one of his earliest developments. He was a keen microscopist, a member of the Quequet and the Royal Microscopical Society. And in his early 20s, he conceived the idea of color contrast illumination, or optical staining, as it's sometimes called. And nowadays, we all refer to it as Rheinberg illumination. And he was 25 when the great E.M. Nelson actually read his paper to the Royal Microscopical Society, and a few months later, he read one himself to the Quequet. When you're using the microscope, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you all this, but when you're using the microscope, there are 2 important aspects of forming as accurate as you can microscope image. One is resolution, and that's handled by the NA and quality of your objectives and your properly set up color illumination. And the other is contrast. Nowadays, we've got lots of means of enhancing contrast. Phase contrast immediately comes to mind, Hoffman interference contrast, DIC, and various other means. But in the 1890s, none of these things were available. In fact, even color illumination wasn't available. They only had source focused or critical illumination. So when he invented or developed Rheinberg illumination, it really was quite important, because lots of people were looking at things in water. And if you think about it, if you're looking at an amoeba in water, the refractive index of the amoeba and the water is jolly similar. So if you're just looking at it with transmitted illumination, especially when you've got the illumination is actually the image of the light source, the surface of a bulb or something, it's very difficult to see the detail. So they were always chasing ways of improving contrast. So they had 3 main ways of doing it. Sound illumination with a patch stop, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. The important point about that is that none of the direct light enters the objective. The patch stop stops any light going straight into the objective, and the only light that goes into the objective is the light that goes round the side and gets scattered by the object in exactly the same way as we see the moon and the planets. They have no color they have no light of their own. We see them in the light of the sun, with our moon and with our Earth in between, like a giant patch stop. So, but one of the issues with dark round illumination is it can produce excessive contrast. On the left-hand picture, I've deliberately underexposed to avoid that problem, but it is an issue. So what they also did was, to increase contrast, was use a colored filter and a patch stop. Now, as you can see, if you look at the picture in the middle, you've got more detail there than you can see in the straightforward dark round image. They used green a lot because they had mostly achromatic objectives, which were corrected for green and suffered from a differential magnification of color at different wavelengths, so that things in the middle were right, but things on the edge had color fringes. So green they used a lot, which is why we used green there. And then Rheinberg said, aha, what if we took away the patch stop and put a contrasting colored filter in its place? And lo and behold, Rheinberg illumination came into existence. And here we have on the right an image where you've got a green Rheinberg central patch, which is giving you light that's going into the objective, and an orange periphery, which is the only light of which is going in, that's scattered by the object. And I think you can see that gives you more contrast still. And if you were looking at live things in pond water or cheek cells or things, pre-phase contrast, this was a great way of doing it. All right. So as this meeting's actually about making things rather than the history of it all, what information do you need to know to make your filters? You don't need to read all this, I'm going to read it to you. You need to know how big the filter needs to be, pretty obvious really, and it needs to be the size of your filter tray or big enough to fill to work with your microscope. And you need to know how big the central color patch needs to be, and that's slightly more complicated. And of course, you need to know where to put them in the optical path of the microscope. Well, first of all, the filters need to go below the condenser, as near to the plane of the condenser iris as possible, or in one of the conjugate planes that is conjugate with it, one of its conjugate planes, right? Many microscope condensers have a swing out filter holder just below the iris, not so much in the modern ones, but the older ones do. And this is an ideal place for your dark round stops and your Rheinberg filters to go. So first of all, the overall size of the filter you need. If you've got any filters, make a note of their diameter, and that's the size you need to fit the holder. If you've got none, you have to measure the diameter of the holder itself, and your stops need to just drop in and out, and it can be easily changed, because I tell you, when you're playing with Rheinberg, you're changing them filters all the time to see whether that gets a better image or that gets a better image or whatever, right? The next thing you need to know is the size of the central patch. Some manufacturers, I know Wilt, Zeiss, Wilt and Leitz do, Zeiss doesn't. And I think Nikon does as well, give you the recommended diameters of dark round stops to use and patches to use with their various objectives. And if you've got some dark round stops which work with your different objectives, that's the size your central patch needs to be. Otherwise, you're going to have to measure the size of your condenser iris using a pair of dividers. Now, that's not as daunting as it sounds, really, but there we go. Right, so to do it, first of all, set up your microscope for bright field use. I always use a ×10 and set up color illumination with a suitable slide for bright field and dark round. The central stop or color patch needs to just be big enough to cover all the direct light that enters the objective. And to find out how big this needs to be, you have to remove the eyepiece, look down the tube, use an eyepiece, no matter which one, look down the tube at the rear lens of the objective. If you've got a phase telescope that you can focus onto the back lens of the objective, this makes the job a hell of a lot easier. And then looking down the eyepiece tube, open and close the condenser iris, you will see that the circle of light gets bigger and smaller accordingly. Now open it until the image of the iris only just disappears and the objective rear lens is filled with light. Right? You need to measure that iris diameter quite accurately. So if you can remove the condenser without moving the iris lever, then using a ruler, or better still a pair of dividers, measure the diameter of the iris. I'm afraid you've got to do this with every one of your objectives, and if you've got more than one condenser, for all your condensers. So it's a bit of a job here, but it doesn't take that long really. Replace the condenser, you only have to do it once. You replace the condenser, repeat the process. I recommend you do it with, if you've got condensers that have a top lens that can be removed, you do it with the top lens and without the top lens, and you do it with the top lens up to 40 and without the top lens up to 20. If you've got a flip top, it makes it easier. And of course, note the fact that the lower powers have a smaller central patch than the higher powers. Okay, so you should then end up with a set of measurements, something like this. Well, this is one I did for somebody else actually. They've got they had a microscope with a 32mm filter, full-size filter, and they had a ×5, ×10, ×20, ×40 objective. And so theirs was the central patch diameter with the lens in and with the lens out, top lens flipped out. And you can see for him I needed 15, 18, 18, 23, and 26. As it happens, exactly the same as I need for mine. Although mine's 33mm, not 32. So for this particular condenser, you need to make 4 sets of Rheinberg filters, all with the same overall diameter, but with different central patch sizes. And remember, you're going to make lots of filters, several filters with different contrasting colors for each objective. And as I said earlier, if you regularly use more than one condenser, if you swap condensers, you'll probably need to make another set for the other condenser. So right, you've now got all all the information you need. So off you go, you can start making your filters. But before you do that, let's have a look at what they look like. Oh, sorry, I have to be out. Here we have at the top a chart kindly provided by, well, I've made it from information provided from Vilt for my Vilt M20 and M11, and I only use fluoritars and plan fluoritars. And so you can see I've measured all the appropriate sizes and put them on the chart. So, and that's actually on just above my bench, so I can immediately look up and say, that's the filter I want to use now. For measuring them, here's what I was talking about earlier. You need to measure that distance, and there it is with the dividers, 18 inches. And if you look over here, you can see a red-blue Rheinberg filter. If that was closed in and you hadn't moved the iris, no red light would go through, but only the blue. You open the iris and the red light provides the color contrast illumination. Here are some filters. These are mine. Patch dots at the top here, colored filters here. This one would have a blue background and a red object, blue background and a yellow object, blue background and plain white light for lighting the object. I use that quite a lot. It works quite well, actually. And there's a number of filters on the right-hand side, Rheinberg filter, various Rheinberg filters on the right-hand side. I'm lucky in that my Vilt M20 has lots of places to put the filters. Here is the swing out filter holder I was talking about before, with, in this case, a dark round stop in it. But because they're such nice people, Vilt were such nice people, they've put another place there where you can put filters in. And because the light coming from here to the back of the condenser is virtually parallel, I've checked it, you can put the filter anywhere you like in between these two areas. So they also produce this rather wonderful device here, a multi-filter holder, which includes even put polarizing filters and circular wave plate filters, although I've never ever seen a circular wave plate filter, I have to admit. But here I've got it set up. At the moment, that's for transmitted light shining straight through, but there I've got a black patch stop. There I've got a Rheinberg filter with a blue background and a red image of the object. And there we've got a quadrant Rheinberg filter. I'll come on to those a little bit later. So what colors do you need? Well, it's bloody well up to you. You can choose whatever color you like. But remember, what you're looking for is contrast. So it should be a color that contrasts with the others. Now, these are the reason you've got the color around the outside edge is that this is a Spence wax sealed fluid mounts, the only fluid mounts I've ever met that actually work for any length of time reliably. And these are macro shots. These weren't taken on the microscope because it's quite a big piece of hydroid. And you can see there's a blue filter with a red surround, red periphery, producing that first image. A blue patch with a yellow surround, producing that darker blue patch and a yellow surround. Green and a clear plain white surround. And here, which I use most of the time, to be frank, because I think it really brings out the objects nicely. Blue, I vary the darkness of the blue, and a clear surround of the same hydroid. And there you can see that's the wax there, not being colored in any way, shape, or form. But it's up to you. Play with it. The whole point of this game is playing with the colors to see what you like personally. So you can buy them, but I'm not going to go into much detail of this. Sometimes you'll find at club meetings, I found this Kodak wraps and this Swift color contrast device at meetings. I wouldn't bother with them, frankly. You can buy them made in America from on a well-known auction site, or if you're a really rich Zeiss man, you can buy a Zeiss polychroma. A typical Zeiss, it's a very expensive and complicated way of doing what is actually quite a simple job, but I'm not prejudiced against Zeiss, ha. Right. So we're talking about making them. You can make them in different ways. Many of my filters and a number of the pictures I will show you in a moment were made with them, were made with a CAD program and then printed out on clear acetate film, the stuff that used to be used for overhead projectors. And then you do a Blue Peter bit and cut them all out. I did that for years because I could not find a 33mm hole punch, which meant I couldn't get one that fitted my filter holder. But nowadays, due to the wonders of the Chinese, you can buy from China punches in millimeter and even half-millimeter differentials in size. So now this is what I use now. There's a 33mm filter for the overall diameter, a 33mm punch, sorry, for the overall diameter of my filters. And then the holes 26, 23, 18, and 15. And what I do is I use gel filters, exactly as you're going to do in a minute. But I don't have the wonderful machine that you're going to be using, so I'm cutting them out with the punches. And what I do is I have a template under a piece of clear plastic on which I punch them, and I punch the central hole first. So I've got a template with different diameter rings. So add to the outside ring. I punch the central hole for the size I want first, and then I punch the outer sides later, and then stick the two together. You can put them on a glass slide, or you can do what I do actually, which is use some very high quality clear sticky plastic and stick them together, because they don't have to be that brilliant because they're out of focus. Right? So, and there you can see that is from those Lee filters on the left hand side. There's one where I've cut out blue and red, and there's some central green patches I've cut out of the green piece. But that's all down to Gordon afterwards to show you how to do all that sort of thing. So let's have a look at some of the things and see why. What's the point? Well, there we are. I think that's a pretty pleasing image. That's the same diatom that we looked at earlier, but from a different slide. It's a 20 image stack with a blue patch and a clear periphery. Here we've got a strew of some radial area. That is a green patch and a clear outside, so you can see the glassiness of the radial area against a green background. Here we have some foraminifera, and you can see there, if that was done as a dark brown, you'd see you would lose almost all this detail in here. It would all be flooded out. But by having blue, give you that little bit of contrast there, you see that here is another foram from that same group at higher magnification, with a blue patch and a yellow periphery. There is diatom, that's a blue patch with a green periphery. Right? And below that is the phantom larvae of a plumed gnat, with a blue patch and a yellow periphery. And that shows, and I'll show you again later, some interesting contrasts with, that's not, I've got it wrong, sorry, that's a clear periphery, but where you've got thick parts of the body, that's showing up in its original color. So here we have some more. This is a tiny Medusa, one of my fluid mounts that's still working, thank goodness. Not many of them are, but one or two I made this back in the 80s. Now that's blue with yellow, and the yellow is optically stains the thicker material stronger than it does the thinner material. So you can see there's some yellow at the end of these balls of nematocysts at the end here, but not much in these on the way through. There is the hydroid of that same Medusa with lighter blue patch and clear. And I think it shows the hydroid rather well. Here's another one of my fluid mounts, which has survived the test of time, to my amazement. A crustacean, a comation, with young. And once again, it shows this is blue and clear. You can see this is the heavier material of the shell of the adult female. And these are the newly ejected, because they weren't actually born. It was when I made the slide and I put the cover glass on, it just touched the object and expel these three. And I thought, oh, that's rather good. So that shows that they are much clearer because they're thinner. Okay, quadrant Rheinberg. I said I'd come to that at the end. On the left-hand side of your picture, you've got various quadrant Rheinberg filters, and you will note that the two opposite quadrants are the same color, and you either have a black central patch stop or you have a colored central patch stop. And what they do is something rather remarkable. If you've got fibers running at right angles to each other, they stain them in different colors. So you can see here the result. We've got a blue fiber going that way. This is a bit of netting, a bit of synthetic netting. Blue fiber going that way, red fibers going that way. So this became actually a great revival in Rheinberg illumination in the 50s and 60s, when synthetic fibers started being made. Because one of the things it does is it really shows up if these wells of the two fibers haven't worked properly. So it was used a lot in the fabrics industry at the time. Nowadays, of course, we know how to weld these things. The process has been perfected and it's not a problem anymore. So it's just fun now. This is a couple of pieces of plankton net, yellow and red with a black background, green and red with a blue background. All good fun, really. But where is it more useful? This is an old Victorian slide of gun cotton I have. Now I think if I look at that with either dark round or bright field, it's not really very exciting. But look at it under Rheinberg. You've got the beautiful blue colours going that way, the red colours going that way. You can see the undulation where the gun cotton isn't completely flat. And that's what it is. It's nowadays, it's got no scientific use really, but it's just fun to do. Here is a piece of cheesecloth. This isn't mounted, it's just laid on the stage. As you can see, it's way out of focus from the others. A bit of kitchen cheesecloth, and this illustrates rather nicely how the colour changes when the orientation of fibres change. Look here, red, oh gosh, blue, red, blue. Right. So that illustrates how this works. And here is what I really like to do: thin sections, very thin sections of unstained, also of wood. This was a carpenter's test for achromatism, or what I called earlier differential magnification in achromatic objectives. But you don't need to use that anymore. It's totally useless from that point of view. But doesn't it make a lovely image? And you can see the vertical fibers in blue, the cross fibers in red, in both directions. There's those little round ones, the ones that are coming towards us. And I think that's really good fun. So all I've got left to say to you is go away, make some, and have a really wonderful Merry Christmas and a colourful Rheinberg New Year. So there we go. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you found that enjoyable, useful, and most of all, I hope you go away and make some. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.